What would you do if you weren't afraid? Would you take a plane to do that trip that you've been putting off for a while? Would you quit your job? Would you start your own business? Just think about how good your life would be if you only overcame fear. And you're in luck, because today I'm going to help you reach that reality. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Brie and I'm a pre-qualified psychologist. After a lot of uni lectures about fear and after learning a lot of therapy techniques aiming at overcoming fear, I only thought it was fair to bring a video on this channel about overcoming your own fears. Especially since spooky season has just ended and during this time of the year all of us think a little bit more about what scares us and what we can do to fight our fears. Because let's face it, fear is one of the biggest things that prevent us having our dream life. So today we're all about overcoming fear, and in the first part of the video we are going to learn a little bit more about fear itself, because I believe that learning is the best way to make something less scary, as it is harder to be afraid of something that you know very well. And then in the second part of the video I'm going to outline an evidence-based step-by-step guide on how you can overcome your own fears. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what is fear? Fear is an emotion. Let's start here. And it's not even a bad emotion, because fear helps us keep us safe. Our ancestors needed fear to survive. And this is why, as humans, we evolved into possessing fear in the first place. Our ancestors recognized that certain things were dangerous, like for example wild animals, and fear acted as an alarm system in their body that made them either run or fight whatever it was that they were afraid of. So fear prevents us from endangering our lives. However, nowadays, our lives are not generally spent in danger. However, our brain has still maintained those ancestral mechanisms for which it doesn't recognize the difference between good challenges and bad challenges. So every time you experience fear, instead of despising it, see it as your friend. Fear just wants to protect you. It wants to keep you safe. But what happens in our brain that makes us experience fear in the first place? Well, the center of fear is considered to be the amygdala. The amygdala receives inputs from our sight or our hearing, and it basically recognizes that there is something that might put us in danger. So it sends signals to our autonomic nervous system, which releases hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol that basically make sure that our body is ready for a fight or to run. So you might start to sweat a little bit, your heart may start pounding, you may find breathing a little bit more difficult. This is your body getting ready for action. The amygdala is also very good at learning about potentially dangerous situations, and this is why if you are attacked or if you experience a traumatic experience, you may become more fearful in a variety of situations, because your brain will start thinking, the world is not safe, I need to protect myself. But we all know that fear presents in different ways depending on the person, and not all of us will be scared of the same things, and in different people fear may present in different ways. So why is that? There are a few psychological theories behind why fear is developed in the first place. For example, according to psychoanalytic theory, a specific fear is a symbol of another stressful situation. So you're not actually afraid of that thing, but you're just trying to avoid a more ingrained psychological difficulty. For example, for someone that is afraid of flying, the fear of taking a plane may actually symbolize a more rooted psychological difficulty that is issues around control. So obviously when you are on a plane, you have very very little control about what is going on around you, and this is why you may find that situation more difficult. So according to psychoanalytic theory, fear is actually a way for people to avoid confronting those more ingrained psychological difficulties. But there is also another theory that comes from classical conditioning, according to which fear is actually the result of a traumatic experience. There is a very famous experiment of a child called Little Albert that was exposed to a rat alongside a very loud noise in early childhood, which resulted in his adult life in him being afraid of rats. So according to classical conditioning, fear is actually learned and comes from traumatic events. With this theory, there is no one that is better than the other. They are just different ways of looking at a possible difficulty. And maybe for each one of us, one may be more true than another. But now that we got to know fear a little bit better, how do we get rid of it? Well, short answer, we can't. We can't get rid of fear entirely, and honestly, we shouldn't. As we saw before, fear is very helpful. Fear actually helps us staying alive. However, we can learn to overcome fear. We need to learn to live with fear whilst avoiding that fear prevents us from living the life that we want and, most of all, the life that we deserve. So, what do we do? The first step is name your fear. This may sound very obvious for most of us, but it actually isn't, because just being very clear on what is it that you're scared of doing can make you more likely to accept that fear, which is the first step to overcome it. So, as an example, I'm going to use myself and the fear that I had until last year of opening this YouTube channel. I've always wanted to open a YouTube channel, but I was extremely terrified of doing it. Now that we have named our fear, the second step is to trace the origin of your fear. So, for example, are you scared of dogs because you got bitten by a dog when you were a kid? In my case, my fear of opening a YouTube channel was strictly linked with my fear of being judged. So as you can see, my fear was actually linked to another fear. What do you do then? What do you do if you then realize that there is something bigger going on there? Well, you need to start dig deeply. And one way to do this is to keep asking yourself why. So, why was I afraid of people judging me? Well, that is because I wasn't very comfortable with the idea of people criticizing me. And why was that? Well, maybe because I used to be a very big people pleaser. So as you can see, now I have traced the root of the problem. What am I gonna do then? Now I know what the problem is. And if I try to solve that problem, then it's going to be so much easier to overcome my fear as well. So one first step was, for example, telling myself that I didn't need to please others, and the only person I really needed to please was myself. And that was the first step into the right direction. Now, after identifying your fear and understanding where it comes from, I want you to list the worst things that could happen if you face that fear. So for me, it was people criticizing me, or being criticized at my job, failing, so not being able to be successful with this YouTube channel. These for me were the worst things that could happen. Of course, if you're afraid of something more tangible, like taking a plane, your answers might look a bit like, oh well, the plane falls and everybody dies. By doing this exercise, you will either realize that the worst things that could happen are not actually that bad, or you might realize how unrealistic some of those consequences actually are. And if possible, try to find a preventative solution for each of the possible problems. So for example, if you're afraid of doing a solo trip because you fear that you might feel very lonely, set up a plan of how you can stay connected with your friends and family even whilst you are away doing your solo trip. And now, after listing the worst things that could happen, now we need to list what is the best outcome that could come out of this. So for me, for example, this YouTube channel was an opportunity for me to connect with like-minded people, to share my thoughts and opinions. There is also the chance that I could one day be very successful with this channel, but you also need to think about what will be the cost of inaction. So what will it cost you to not overcome your fear in 3 months, in 6 months, 1 year, or 3 years time? So for me, not taking the chance of opening this YouTube channel might prevent me 3 years from now to be a very successful content creator. And at the most basic level, fear is something that prevents us from experiencing things. So the cost of inaction for me will also be the opportunity to make this experience and to learn from it, even if it fails. If you're afraid of taking the plane, think about all the places in the world you will never be able to see if you do not overcome your fear. Fear has a cost, and maybe that cost is not that big in the short term, but in the long term, it could actually create a ripple effect that might deprive you of all the best outcomes in your life. The next step is to start challenging your thoughts. According to this book over here, each one of us has something called phobic thoughts. These are thoughts that justify your fear and make your irrational fear sound more rational. This is how you then maintain your fear in the first place. So what you need to do is to list all your phobic thoughts around your fear and challenge them. So for example, in my case, I was afraid that people were gonna judge me if I started this YouTube channel. And when I challenged that thought, I told myself that nobody would actually care if I started this YouTube channel, and spoiler alert, nobody cared. Let's go back to the fear of flying. If you're scared that your plane is gonna fall, one way to challenge the thought is repeating yourself that planes are actually very safe and they are even safer than cars. The next step is learn. As I said before, I believe that learning is the greatest weapon against fear. The more you learn about something, the less scared you will be. So if you're afraid of flying, actually learning how a plane works and why a plane is such a safe transportation method will actually help you, make you feel less scared. If you're afraid of public speaking, reading books or listening to podcasts about public speaking and practicing a lot will reduce that fear. In my case, I spent the first 2 months of this year learning about how to open a YouTube channel, how to edit video, how to write successful scripts, and all of this made me feel more confident. The next step, and this is the biggest one, is expose yourself to the fear. And yes, you knew this was coming. Obviously, you don't need to do that all of a sudden. You need to do this gradually. If you're afraid of taking a plane, of course, don't start with a 7-hour flight. Maybe start with a local, short, half-an-hour flight. This will also help us challenge the beliefs that we talked about before. In my case, I started uploading a very short introductory video to my channel that, by the way, you can still find on my channel to these days. That was just basically an introduction to the channel where I was presenting myself. It was very quick. I uploaded it without thinking a lot about it, but that was my first step. And after that first video, all the following videos became easier and easier to post. Of course, facing your fear is stressful, and in the moment, it might be a very difficult situation to manage. And if that is your case, you can use some techniques. You could, for example, do a breathing exercise. One that I really like is the box breathing technique, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath again for 4 seconds. Ideally, you should repeat this 10 times to feel better. That helps regulate your breath, which, as we saw before, may become a little bit irregular when you are experiencing experiencing a scary or stressful situation. You could also try visualization, so visualizing the best possible outcome that could come from you overcoming your fear. So for example, if you're on a flight and you start being very scared, you can close your eyes and picture yourself having an amazing time at your desired destination. And you could also think about all the amazing things that you will be able to do once the flight lands and also once you finally overcome your fear. You could also ask for someone's help. In cognitive behavioral therapy, sometimes a technique called modeling is used. That is when the therapist or a third person acts as a model in what we call the exposure therapy. That is the therapy which involved exposing yourself to whatever it is that you fear. And the role of the model is, of course, to provide support to the person that is working towards the fear, but it is also to show the person that there is nothing to be afraid of. So going back to the flight example, if you're trying to overcome that fear, it might be helpful to do it with someone that is, of course, not afraid of flying, and that will remain calm throughout that situation, and that will actually show you that there is nothing to be afraid of, and it will actually make you feel calmer as well. And finally, the last step is repetition. In neuroscience, there is a say, neurons that fire together wire together. What it means is that the more you do something, the better you will become at it. You need to keep expanding your comfort zone, and you need to keep facing your fear over and over again. The second you stop doing that, it is very likely that your fear will come back. Overcoming fear is a process of continuous learning, and you need to keep doing that to reduce your fear day by day. And this brings us to the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you did, you can leave a thumbs up or leave a comment, as it really helps the algorithm apparently. If you like this video, you might also like my video on how to change your relationship with money, where we also talk about how to face the anxiety and the stress that come from money management, which I'm going to leave somewhere here and on the end screen. If you're interested in learning more about psychology and in using psychological tools to support your self-development and improve your well-being, then you should stick around by subscribing so that you don't miss any of my future videos. As usual, you will find my website and my socials in the description box below. There is also a link to subscribe to my free newsletter, where I share a lot of insights about psychology and lessons from my own personal journey. And that is really all for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!